Hello and welcome to another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. Bob Mueller with News 2, Bruce Dobie, Nashville media entrepreneur, coming to you from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse in the heart of downtown Nashville, talking a little politics, and it's been a busy week.
It has
a couple of things from different sources. Carl Dean, former mayor of Nashville, two-term popular mayor of Nashville, doing a statewide tour, looking at possibly running for state office. What do you think?
Big deal for Carl, and of course he's got the money. He's got a city to show for a statewide campaign. You know, we are the shining city on the hill.
Brought him through a recession and out of a recession.
Out of a flood. He can crisis manage. He can build a city. Economics are great here, so he's got a lot to show. Carl's challenge really is he's an urban presence in a state that is essentially rural. So how Carl plays to the rural audiences, that's a tricky one. And of course he's got an opponent too, Bill Freeman. Is Freeman going to run as a Democrat for that nomination as well?
And Freeman's probably a better retail politician than Carl Dean is with the outlying area, with rural areas. That would be an interesting pairing. Carl's a moderate.
Yep.
He may not like that term, but he's a moderate. He can get along. He cuts a deal. He wants to make things done. So that's a plus to some people, a negative for other people.
Yeah, yeah. You know, he spent like 6 months to a year on this education project. So he's really got some policy substance to a potential candidacy. He's got what amounts to a government in exile wrapped around the issue of really charter schools and public education. So he's got some chops.
He's a big mass transit guy, which is going to be a key issue over the next 20 years or so. So going to be an interesting situation to see where he goes. He could run for the U.S. Senate too, but governor's probably the likely race that he would enter.
Yeah, we got those 2 seats coming up, right? Potentially. I mean, if Corker decides not to run, we've got
becomes a cabinet member.
Or becomes a cabinet member, or vice president.
Or vice president.
Doubtful, but who knows. Then we've got 2 statewide seats, and we can talk to our guest, Mary Mancini, chairwoman of the Democratic Party, about this later. But that really is going to be some activity on the political front. So you'll have a U.S. Senate seat potentially coming open, and then you got this gubernatorial election, and both of those will generate a lot of activity.
Big news nationally coming out of Nashville. Bill Kristol, the National Review, looking for a third-party candidate to run against Donald Trump.
Yep.
He's coming out of Columbia, Tennessee. David French, a blogger for the National Review.
You're a good friend.
Written books. I don't know the man.
I've never met him either.
For Sarah Palin, obviously a right-wing conservative. I sent him a note today, see if he'll do an interview. Don't know anything about him, but here we go. It looks like this guy's going to do it. It looks like they're going to move forward with it. Where it goes, who knows? But this really makes the Republican contest more interesting.
Yeah, and Mary was blogging like, who the heck is this guy before the show started. He's a blogger for the National Review. I've never heard of him. I've been around politics for 30 years. You've been around longer than I have. I mean, we don't even know this guy. And then Kristol puts out tweets last night that they have found a credible candidate, big name, credible, smart guy, and here's David French from Columbia, Tennessee.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But that's the interesting national news coming out of Nashville. As I said, Mary Mancini is going to be joining us later, the chair of the state Democratic Party. Here we are in this supermajority Republican state, so a big hill to climb. We're going to talk about how she's going to move forward trying to get new offices taken back by the Democrats. But speaking of the legislature, the Attorney General issued an opinion this week saying that indeed, after some Republicans had asked, is it in his purview to investigate Jeremy Durham and allegations of sexual harassment against females in the Legislative Plaza, he said indeed it is in his purview. That investigation has been going on. This incident has been going on for more than a year, so it's still in limbo. There was an event for Durham's re-election campaign. Glenn Cassida and some other rank Republicans were there. It's all interesting. There's no separation. He's got 2 Republican candidates and a Democratic candidate, Holly McCall, who we've had on this program. But now it looks like that investigation anyway will go forward.
Yeah, and I mean, you are throwing a high and outside slow pitch to every Democrat in the state right now. This just shapes up beautifully for Democrats. And, you know, you've got Trump uttering misogynistic stuff right and left, and you've got this investigation which can now proceed about a man who has hit on how many potentially dozens of interns, and you've got what Holly McCall described as a frat party up at Capitol Hill. This looks really good for And you've got this initiative by Democrats to run a lot of women for the state legislature. So this narrative is shaping up nicely for Democrats.
Let's bring Mary Mancini in. She's
Absolutely.
the chair of the State Democratic Party. Talk a little bit about this women's initiative. This is
Sure.
very nice. Nice of you to join us on the
Of
Bruce
course,
and Bob
of
Show.
course.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We set you up, you know, it is a big hill.
Thank you for
with
this.
with all the,
Oh, wait, is this not mine?
you can have that.
No, Bruce, I don't want to take your cocktail.
With all the Republicans elected
Yeah.
in office here, a majority of the congressional delegation, both U.S. senators, the governor's office, a supermajority in both houses, it is an uphill climb. You have made some inroads. You have some strong young leadership in the Democratic Party. You have some new people looking at running. We had Holly McCall on, who's running against Jeremy Durham. There's an initiative to get more women involved. Yeah. Talk about how you take that step one at a time to get up that mountain.
Well, I mean, it's just like you said, it's one step at a time. First of all, I used to go around saying it's hard to be a Democrat. I've changed that and said it's hard work to be a Democrat, because as I've been traveling around the state, I have noticed that there are a lot more Democrats than the other side wants us to think there are. So, and if you look at who we elect statewide, you mentioned it earlier when talking about Mayor Dean. When you look at who we elect statewide, we elect strong moderates. Mm-hmm. And whether that's for governor, you know, Phil Bredesen did a fine job of getting all 95 counties the last time he ran for governor, and he's a Democrat. Even the Republicans that we elect, Bob Corker, Lamar Alexander, they're considered moderates.
Howard Baker.
Yeah. So this state is not as right wing as people want us to think it is. Now that said, our state legislature, it's a little bit different, right? Our state legislature is full of right-wing extremists, and the folks up there that aren't that way, the leaders, Beth Harwell, for instance, Glenn Cassida, they're not doing enough to lead and show leadership and rein those extremists in.
Are they afraid of them?
You know, I think that there's an element of that. There's an element of
primary that if you don't.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily being afraid of the extremist legislators. It's being afraid of the folks that have the money that want to back extremist legislators. So we saw that when Insure Tennessee came into play. They put it in front of a committee, mostly Republicans on that committee, and each one of them thought about it and then said, "Oh no, we can't even look at this. We can't even." There was not even a discussion. That was because they were being threatened with primary opponents. It has nothing to do with whether or not it was good policy. Nothing, because they didn't even consider it. So yeah, I think there's that element of it. Now to answer your question, you know, we are fielding 114 Democratic candidates in this election cycle. We're working with them. We're working well with the House and Senate caucus, working well with our candidates, getting them prepared to do the tough grinding work necessary that it takes to win elections. The Republicans didn't take this state overnight. They did it one election at a time, and that's how we're looking to take it back, one election at a time.
Okay, so you all set about to round up a lot of, in particular, female candidates to run for the General Assembly. Tell us a little bit about where that initiative came from, why female,
why you recruit.
How you recruit, and but really theoretically, why does it make sense to run a bunch of females at this point in time?
Well, again, you said it earlier, so let me answer that first. It makes sense because we have misogynists at the top of the ticket in terms of the presidential race. You know, Trump is not popular with women. Right. We also have a situation at the state legislature with Jeremy Durham, who has he's under investigation by the Attorney General for sexually harassing dozens of women, and leadership in his own party who covered it up for almost a year and did nothing about it. So that's kind of the reason why, but the idea wasn't our idea. The idea came from these women who were fighting for Insure Tennessee, that were up at the state capitol, that were in their communities knocking on doors and doing sort of the advocacy work for Insure Tennessee. They got to the point where they said, we're not making any inroads with these folks from the outside, so let's start looking at making changes from the inside. And so they actually came to us and said, we want to run for office. And then that gave us the idea to, you know, put together this initiative to group these women together and say, you want to run on the Pass Insure Tennessee platform? That's a great idea. And that's where it came from. It was them.
You guys have been fighting hard to keep Insure Tennessee alive. I mean, really, after it went down in flames, there was no support for the governor. It was a good idea by the governor. He worked hard to try to find some kind of compromise where he could use this Medicaid money. We knew the legislature didn't want to expand Obamacare, but he figured out a way to use this money without doing that in his view. Others said it did expand it, and it would help 300,000, 250,000 Tennesseans. Well, it went nowhere. Beth Harwell did not support him the way he should have. Do you give her any credit? I give her a little bit for at least doing the study committee this summer, appointing people to relook at the issue, to try to figure out a way in this hardcore right legislature to figure out a way to get something through there, to find out a way to use some of this money to help Tennesseans.
You're a much more forgiving person than I am. I think it's just them dragging their feet again, and it's her dragging her feet.
You don't think anything's going to come out of it?
No. I mean, they had a plan that a Republican governor put together that was completely paid for. It didn't start out that way, but they arranged it so that now it's completely paid for. And they didn't even look at it. They didn't even bring it. It didn't even pass through one Senate committee, right? It didn't go through the usual process to get to the floor and to have the discussions of it. It was just no. And now they want to pretend that they're doing something about it. She wants to pretend that she's doing something about it by having this study committee. So no, it's just it's a lot more hot air and a lot more smoke and mirrors, basically.
Have you held talks with Freeman and/or Carl about running for governor?
I have not. No.
That was question number one. Question number two: you think Jeremy Durham is an isolated incident, or when the final chapter in this saga is written, will there be other legislators who will have been exposed?
Right.
Sending these offensive messages around.
So I think, again, this goes back to Speaker Harwell's leadership. So I was up as a lobbyist at the legislature for a number of years, and I think that Holly described it pretty accurately. And when you look, yes, and when you look at a woman who gets elected to woman Speaker of the House gets elected in that position, you expect, as a woman, I expected there to be a culture change. And I expected for that to kind of end, and for it to be a more serious environment. And it's a blanket statement. I'm not saying that there aren't serious people up there, because there are. But as a woman, I look at her and I think over the past 5 years, she has just failed us completely. And she just turned a blind eye to what's happening up at the legislature. And then specifically in this Durham incident, I mean, she did nothing. She said, go talk to, and this is how we know she knew about it, right? She said, go talk to Human Resources and Connie Ridley. And Connie Ridley, you talk to him about what's appropriate behavior. So she didn't try to fix it. And with each incident, she says, I don't have the power to do this. This is not my call.
But what do you know
I call bull on that.
What do you know that she knew?
I don't know specifically that she knew. Specifically, that she knew what exactly was happening, but you don't send someone to talk to Human Resources without knowing that there's a problem.
Okay.
And it's specifically about talking to Human Resources about what's appropriate behavior. Mm-hmm. So I think it's fair to say that, and specifically now that we know much more about Jeremy Durham, that she had an idea and an inkling of what was going on.
We know for a fact that a year ago, almost, it'd be a year in November, rumors were circulating, discussions were being had among folks down there about what's going on here. People were coming to the speaker. I think she even had a conversation with him.
Gerald McCormick actually had a conversation with two women that came to him in July of 2015.
This was not a sudden revelation. No. There were rumors outside of Capitol Hill that something was going on down here. My question is, I know Beth Harwell a long time. She's a smart woman. She's a powerful woman. She's come up through the ranks. She's earned her position as speaker. And yet she seems to not have acted at all on this. Was it fear? Was it because of future political ambitions? Was it people threatening, you won't hold your speaker's job? I don't understand why she stalled on this. What's your opinion of that?
So she's also disappointing, right? So I think the way you described her is absolutely correct. She is all these things, but she's also, again, as a woman, she's an incredibly disappointing leader. I think it's because she does have political ambitions. And so, I don't want to give her any free advice, but I think she would be much more popular if she stopped worrying about being elected in a primary and started worrying about doing her job and leading and taking strong stands on things like Insure Tennessee, taking strong stands on inappropriate behavior by her members. I think that would you know, again, we're a moderate state, right? I think that would garner her a lot more respect from both Republicans and Democrats who actually elect people in this state, instead of worrying about her, you know, winning a primary for governor.
Let's talk election night November.
This coming November or
yes,
2 years
this,
ago?
no, this
Okay.
this
All
coming
right.
November.
This one could be fun.
Yes.
What are your numbers in the legislature going to look like? I mean, do you think you're going to make some gains?
You know,
numerically?
I do.
You feel
I
okay?
do. I absolutely
That's a
do.
bold prediction. That's good.
But I didn't say a number, right?
Well, give me a number.
So I'm not going to give you a number.
Okay.
And here's why. Because,
Can you break the supermajority?
you know, I don't want to even talk about numbers, and I'll tell you why. Again, I mentioned it earlier, right? We have, the Republicans didn't get here to where they are overnight. We're not going to get the majority back overnight either. So we're looking at, and we're planning in 2-year cycles, right? We're planning for 2016, 2018, 2020, and we hope to make incremental gains over those 3-year cycles. Building a bridge, you know, making small changes. Things are changing. The electorate is changing in Tennessee. The electorate now looks a lot different than it did in 2010, and it's going to look a lot different in 2020. So we're going to have to take each election cycle, see how we do, and then reevaluate. The districts reevaluate, our candidates, you know, reevaluate what issues are important. It's a long-range plan.
You're a superdelegate?
I am a super
Who
delegate.
are you voting for?
I need to get one of those T-shirts that have a big S on it. You know, I'm a Hillary supporter. I'm
Okay.
just going to say it. I am. And I like what Bernie has to say. I like the fact that he is
Fighting for his principles?
yeah. I mean, he's talking a lot about things that really matter. You know, fairness and justice, you know, economic justice.
Let's close out with this. It's beyond our purview, but the presidential election obviously is the big election coming up. Tennessee's, Donald Trump's going to win Tennessee. That's going to happen. You know, for those who don't support him, unfortunately, for those who do, they've been fighting hard for it. What's going to happen as we go into November? Is Hillary being hurt by Bernie Sanders continuing to go on? Can Donald Trump continue to do what he did yesterday and to some, the insulting ways of women, minorities, the press, you name it?
Yeah.
Those who support him, we've talked about this before, it doesn't matter. They are with him. They are not leaving his side. The question is, can he get that 15%, that 15 million people that always decide the elections, can they move over? Who's going to get those people?
He will not get those people. He will not. That's my prediction. He's not well-versed enough in policy. He's not smart enough. He can't control these outbursts that he has, and it's not real talk, right? It's misogynistic talk and it's bigoted talk. It's not he's not a straight shooter. And again, I think this country, the country that elected Barack Obama twice, is not going to elect Donald Trump for president, regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Mary Mancini, Chair of the State Democratic Party. Appreciate you coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Love it.
We'll do it for another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. Bob Mueller, Bruce Doby, and Mary Mancini coming to you from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse downtown. We'll see you back here next week. Great. Very nice.
Awesome. I think.